We'll talk about a little bit about financing as it relates to inventory planning and forecasting. The reason why I wanted to talk about inventory planning and forecasting because if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. I wanted to talk about that because all of these things that we've seen, that I've done from a modeling standpoint or that we've seen with companies we've invested in, having a plan and having a path forward is one of the things that you need in order to help secure financing, whether it be debt or equity financing. So when you think about the importance of inventory planning, I'm not going to read everything on here, but I think the biggest importance for any brand supplier is reducing out of stock. So your best ability is availability, right? So if you're on shelf, you have the opportunity to be picked up, to be sold, to be tasted, and then have repeat purchases. If you're out of stock, somebody that might have wanted to buy your product now goes on to the next product. And if that product, tastes good, then that's a lesser chance that you have of getting your product tried and selling through, increasing your velocity and turnover and things of that way. The other thing I want to talk about here on this slide is really like lowering holding costs. So if you have a big inventory and a big storage, you're probably paying for storage at a warehouse or you're paying for, storage somewhere else. So those storage costs are going to drive down your gross margins. As you're driving down your margins, there's less money that you have to spend on sales and marketing activity. And we all know from this business, you want to make sure that, you can maximize your gross margin and maximize your cash flow. So that way you can think about sales, marketing, doing the things that will actually drive your business and get your business growing out in the stores and with your consumers. So some of the challenges that we've seen when you look at inventory planning is, I think we all know COVID. So if you talk about like supply chain complexities, how many in this room were without bottles for like 4 to 6 months, from their product? Yeah. So if you can imagine when I just talked about like reducing out of stock, right? If you don't have a bottle for 4 to 6 months, that's 4 to 6 months of sales that you lost. And that's, 4 to 6 months of cash that you haven't gained to keep, moving your business forward. Second thing when we think about it is just like fluctuating demand, right? So there's different times when your demand will fluctuate based on either the market, the consumer, or, even political reasons or different things like that. So you definitely want to plan ahead just to make sure you can kind of buffer for any of those. So if you know that there's, if that, inflation rates are going and people are spending less, you kind of want to plan for that. If you're seeing, heavy pickup within your retailers, within your distributors, you want to plan for that. So that way you make sure your distributors have the stock that they need. So when we think about identifying some of these risks, they're external and internal risks. As I talked about, customers and consumers, demand risk is always a big risk when you think about any of your planning and anything that you're doing. When you think about it on the internal side are things that you can control, but there are things that you have to think about and you have to plan for, and that you really have to put in the work to make sure that your model, your spreadsheet really focuses on kind of some ebbs and flows within the market, ebbs and flows within seasonality, and ebbs and flows within cash as well. So you can think about when cash is needed, how much cash is needed, and how long it's going to take for you to recoup the cash that you put out in the inventory. So I want to get into cash flow management right now. So as we all know, cash is king, right? So when you're doing your forecast, your cash flow cycle, you want to make sure that you understand your cycle. So understand when you're purchasing, how long it takes to make the product, when the product goes to the distributor, how long it takes to get your money from the distributor, and then have that cycle on repeat. And then also think about the other things that go within that. So if you have a sales team, how often are you paying your sales team? Is it a fractional team? Are they based on commission? Are they, employees, different things like that? And then when you think about marketing that goes into it as well, are you using a marketing company? Are you doing samplings? Are you doing tasting? So when you understand your cycle, you can then start to think about your forecasting needs, because now you know when money is going out, when money is coming in, how much money you need, how much money you're going to get back. With this, you can also look at optimizing your inventory. So you want to make sure that, one, you don't have too much inventory, and secondarily, that you have enough inventory. So as I talked about, with the reducing out of stocks, if you have too little inventory, you're not going to be on shelf. If you have too much inventory, you're paying extra costs and ultimately driving down your working capital that you could use in other areas. And then lastly, just looking at leveraging financing options. So the last couple slides will talk about different financing options. But once you understand your cycles and once you understand your cash needs, then you can figure out the best way to kind of meet the cash flow negative. So if it's debt, if it's equity, you can think about different ways to kind of meet that, which works for your business. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. So now when we get into forecasting, right? So we talked about like why you need to plan, the importance of it and different things like that. We talked about how, cash flow, why that's needed. So now we'll talk about just the demand forecast and why a demand forecast is needed. It says right here that accurate demand forecasting is crucial for this. I mean, it's crucial for any business really, but when you think about in the spirits industry, like you're selling bottle by bottle and case by case, right? So when you're thinking about your forecast, you're forecasting your consumer, how many bottles that consumer may buy, how many, cases that then relates to the store, how many cases the distributor is going to buy, how many cases you need to produce. Like it all goes back to like bottles and cases. So you just want to make sure like your demand forecast is as accurate as possible. And I say accurate as possible because at the beginning of your life cycle, you're really not going to know how much you need. So you're going to be consistently adjusting that forecast as your business continues to grow throughout the month. So, everybody has goals of, we're going to be, the top company, we're going to sell 50,000 cases. But I would say if you're in year 1 or 2, please do not plan for 50,000 cases because I think the only person I've seen do that is The Rock from Terramana. And unless you're The Rock, then I have money for you from our investment and we can get that started today. So here's just a couple of techniques, right? So I think, for brands that have been there for a while and for modeling that I've done at, Diageo and Pernod, we normally looked at like historical sales data analysis. So when you look at the past, you're able to look at your seasonality. You're also able to look at, kind of like your lost and gain accounts and different things like that. And you can almost, I would say to a T, kind of predict what you would need for next year. Some things that may fluctuate that is if you have an innovation or if you had like a delisting. So like if one of your stores decided that they weren't going to take you anymore, then you have to take that into consideration. Or if you have an innovation, you have to take that into consideration as well because that innovation could spike your numbers that you need for that year. I would say like for brands probably like 5 years and under, I would probably focus on like, customer demand and then like a qualitative forecast. So if you have a distributor, you're working with a distributor, put together a forecast for them and get the distributor to buy into your forecast. And if your forecast, in a way is reasonable and makes sense, you can get the distributor to buy into that you're working with the distributor to kind of reach those cases for the year. So then that way you kind of know like, okay, the distributor and I aligned on 700 9-liter cases for the year. So I know that I at least need 700 to fulfill that plus other needs that are going to come in throughout that. And, customer demand, if you're out in the market, and you're doing samplings and tastings, understand what the customer is saying. Ask certain questions like, how often are you drinking this? How often are you buying this? Are you, is this something that you're bringing to a party? Is it something that you're only consuming at home by yourself? Just to gauge how your customer is interacting with your brand. Because then that way, like, okay, well, one customer throughout the year, if they're taking it to a party, they could potentially buy 3 or 4 bottles. If they're consuming it by themselves, unless they drink a lot, it's only going to be like 1 or 2 bottles. So those are just some things to take into consideration. And then lastly, we all know about, debt and equity financing, right? So debt financing is a way that you can, finance your unmet cash needs with, different types of loans, different types of lines of credits, different things like that. I would say one of the things when you think about debt financing, you also have to make sure you can pay back the debt, right? So if your money isn't turning quick enough, you don't want to necessarily get caught up in debt financing because then you could wind up spending more money covering your debt and then not have enough money to cover your sales or your marketing aspects. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on the investment side. I'm saying that realistically. When you think about from the equity financing side, right, you have, angel investors, which could be affluent individuals or high net worth individuals, friends and family. Then you have institutional investors. One of the things that, we always talked about people that we're investing in is that when you're growing your company, kind of like at the beginning, it may be a little easier to get, equity financing and debt financing, because most debt financing, unless you're turning positive cash flow, like a bank isn't going to lend to you. So then you're looking at either, hard money lenders, factoring, different things like that could really reduce cash. But when you look at equity financing, yes, you are giving up a portion of your equity, but you're getting that capital injection that you need in order to grow your business. Fun fact is that, and we talk about this a lot, like if you look at the Walmart family, they own 40% of their company, but they make, the majority of the decisions. So just because you're giving up equity in your business does not mean you can't still be the decision maker of your business and how your business grows and how your business performs. So with that, that's the end of my presentation. I hope that I gave you something that you could take away, and I'll be here for questions afterwards. Thank you.